In there. 60. 55 is fine. 50 is not bad. You don't have real big or real wide equipment. Besides noticing the obvious beauty of this gray horse, one of the first things that you should be aware of is that the horse is rather indifferent to the owner as soon as it's turned loose. It's meandering around, looking around, checking out its surroundings, with little concern for the owner. Hey, time out, time out. You know what you're going to do? What? Yep, and then? Okay. How old is he?
Okay.
11. So we have a giant economy-sized gray 11-year-old. All right, let's get his attention first. When the owner attempts to get the horse's attention by using the bag, she has to repeatedly use the bag harder and harder until finally the horse snorts, turns around, and almost indignantly says, "All right, what do you want?" You should also notice how high the horse's head is when he looks at the owner. The horse takes off on his own, and the owner is attempting to send the horse off in the direction she chooses. And she's running with the horse going the opposite way he should, trying to get the horse to turn. This is her first attempt at controlling the horse while the horse is loose, and the horse is showing a substantial resistance. As the owner attempts to reverse the horse for the first time, her body position is very good. She runs way in front of the horse, anticipating the horse may test her, to be in place to get the horse to turn when she asks for it with her point and her wand and bag. And the horse responds rather well. Note that the next time she reverses the horse here, he actually turns well, but he comes in and actually gives her the horsey finger and kicks towards her, which is a very strong act of resistance, if not defiance. Now the horse decides to stop on his own, and she has to use the bag to get him to keep going. Now she reverses him one more time, and then she gets quiet, offering him the opportunity to come in and join her herd. He not only isn't stopping, in some cases he's actually speeding up. And now he actually turns and comes in at her, kicks at her, giving her the horsey finger again. Do you think this horse's attitude is nice and submissive? It's not. She needs to go after him like she's going to do right here and use the bag to reinforce to him that that is not a good choice for him to be doing that. You must not allow him to run in and kick at you without some type of animated response if you're going to stop that behavior and change his attitude. Once again, the owner gets quiet, offering the horse a chance to come in and join her herd, but the horse instead chooses to keep going. He is going to avoid her, and he's trying to run away from having to give in. Also notice that his head keeps turning out. It is not facing her politely. It is looking away for a choice or an option where he can get away from giving in to her. We are going to get the girl to back up, moving off center every time the horse comes around behind her. If he comes towards you again with his head high, I want that bag waving in his face, and I want you to run right past. As the horse continues to go around her, I have her back up another step again. And this time the horse responds by stopping and turning and facing her. Note when he stops how high his head is. He's looking around, and then immediately he turns and goes the opposite direction he was going as an act of resistance, if not defiance, for her. Once she gets him to reverse, she simply stops and gets quiet again, and at this point she is way off center of the pen, which is good, and the horse comes around and stops facing her. But again, Notice his mouth isn't moving, his head isn't dropping, and he stops with his head way up high. He looks around for a minute and then once again tries to sneak off in the opposite direction he was going, regaining control from her. She immediately responds by sending him back off in the correct direction. Once she has successfully turned him back in the appropriate direction, she again stops and gets quiet, off center in the ring, and again the horse circles around, turns, and faces her. But he is still head high. Each time she loses the horse's attention, she pops the bag to get the attention back on her. And once again, he challenges her, he tests her by going off in the opposite direction, and she immediately has to use the bag to send him back the correct way. And yet again he reverses, trying to take control away from her, and she again must send him back in the right direction. I now have her move back towards the middle to regroup and start her efforts again. Now the horse is so determined to get control that he has gone from a trot to a canter and is actually beginning to run around the pen, looking for a way to avoid her taking control of him. He is on his own, going around and around. He is looking out, his head is high. I want you to observe the attitude of this horse, because it is not an attitude of submissive respectfulness. It is not the attitude we want in this horse. He is trying to be in control, and that is what has to change. Since he has developed this attitude that he's going to run away from her, and that's got him moving, we're going to attempt to get him to stop again by moving her a step back off of center every time he comes around from behind her.
Another step back, small step, small step. Now let me explain what we're doing. What's going on?
Now, once again, he tries to reverse on her, trying to take control away from her, and she has to get the bag going to send him back in the appropriate direction. All of these actions are about who's in control. The advantage here is that you have a controlled environment with the round pen, and you have not got to deal with the size and strength of the horse physically. He's over there, you're over here, and this battle for control is a mental exercise. It is not a physical struggle. A horse this athletic and this big is not somebody you want to start a fight with. Again, as she gets a bit off center, the horse turns and comes into her. He actually stops and comes into her, but most important, I want you to see where his head is compared to where it was before. His head is much lower, and notice the focus that he is giving her compared to what happened before. Horses only pay attention to what they think are important. If he is not paying attention to you, he doesn't think you're very important. And that's something you often have to earn. From a horse like this, you really have to earn it. Now finally, for the first time, you see his mouth moving and his head is dropping substantially. We are making progress simply by her being persistent and patient and consistent. Notice how much his mouth is moving, and in conjunction with that, how much his head is dropping. Also notice how much of the time we've been in the pen with this horse, the owner has been standing still. People say standing still does nothing. They don't understand horses. Again, she briefly loses his attention, pops the bag to get it back. Having seen how willing this horse was to run and run and run to avoid giving in to her, this is not a horse that a conventional round pen approach would work well with, because you would run the horse and run the horse and run the horse into fatigue. In this situation, it is really good to get the horse to stop. And once he stops, don't do anything. Do exactly what she's doing. Watch the horse, observe what he's showing you, and wait. So how long should you really stand here and wait with this horse this way? Without being flipped, the answer is as long as you need to. Let me put it a different way. When the horse is trying to avoid her, looking away, head sky high and not paying attention, and running and running and running, she has no control. She can barely control the fact that the horse is going the direction she wanted. When she gets this horse to stop, come into her, even though he didn't come all the way in, he came part of the way in. And he will focus on her as he's given her better attention since he stopped this time. Even though it startled him, he still hasn't left. He's still, and that's good. He finally begins to tune her out, She pops the bag a few times trying to get his attention back, but to each time he just begins to turn. Finally he turns and goes away in the opposite direction, so she has to run over and send him back in the direction he was supposed to be going. Again, rather than sending him off and running and running and running him, once you get him to yield to you by turning and going back the way you wanted, stop and get quiet. And that's what she does. And almost immediately he turns and faces her and stops again. We're making progress here. Again, notice when he stops, his head's a bit high, but his mouth is working. For him to be paying attention to her, he must put one eye or one ear or more on her at all times. So each time she loses both eyes and both ears, she's popping the bag to get his attention back on her. It takes a few responses, but it does get the job done.
You can't just demand it, because they may say no. There goes the no, there goes the head down again.
After thinking about it for a few minutes, he decides he's going to turn and sneak off in the opposite direction again. And immediately she goes after him and sends him back in the correct direction, reestablishing to him that she is in charge. Each exercise of her controlling him at a distance is very, very powerful in getting him to change his attitude and become respectful of her. Notice as the owner was listening to me talk to her, the horse reversed and headed backwards right in front of her, and she didn't catch it at first. But then she goes after the horse to turn him back the way he's supposed to be. Notice as he goes around and around, where she is standing in the round pen, she is closer to the fence where her back is. And as the horse approaches that tight area between the lady and the fence, the horse speeds up every time he comes around. The pressure on his bubble by her being close is what's causing him to speed up, to charge behind her, and then slow down as he comes back in front where the pressure decreases. And that time as he came in, rather than speed up, he actually looked at her, an indication of a bit of respect there. Notice now, he's beginning to drop his head again. That's what we want to see. And again, another quick look as he comes in behind her. When you get a horse who seems to settle into a pattern of going and going and going, willing to avoid you in this fashion, maybe you should reverse him. And that's what we have her do here. Once again, he tries to reverse on her, and she has to correct it. So one technique you can use if you get a horse like this who wants to go and go and go is to not let him do all those laps. Reverse him. Let him do a lap or so, or a half a lap. Reverse him again. Let him do another lap. Reverse him again. In other words, don't let him get into that mindset of run, 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 run. Every time you reverse him, you bring his attention back to you, which is good. Every time you reverse him, you assert your control over him while he is loose and free, and that is also good.
Now run more directly at the horse when you turn the next time. Don't go so far.
Going at him is more assertive than just moving sideways. I coach her at this point into doing just that. Notice there how she was going more towards the horse to be more assertive with him. This one horse did more laps in his session than all the other horses in this entire workshop put together. And you need to understand that we are not making him do those laps. He is choosing to do them, and we are actually trying to get him to stop. And that is the battle we're having right now, getting him to give in. As the horse has decided to keep going and going, now once again we will apply the technique of getting off center in the ring. In other words, as he comes around from behind, out from behind the handler, she will step back a step, moving her position off center in the ring, creating less pressure on the horse in front of her and more pressure on the horse in the back. Horses learn from the release of pressure, but there must be the pressure on in order for it to be released. In this case, the horse is feeling enough pressure from her being in the middle that he just keeps going. We have got to make that pressure he feels intermittent, increasing it as she backs up and decreasing it in front where the pressure is less. Again and again, the horse keeps going around and around, looking for a way out of his dilemma. The dilemma being, I don't really want to give in to this person. I'm in charge. I have done this same process with horses where I ended up 3 or 4 feet from the fence and the horse charging between there and slowing down in front of me. So as you continue to back up, you will get closer and closer to the fence, creating more pressure behind you on the horse and less pressure in front. As the horse goes around, he gets pressure on as he comes in behind her. Then as he goes out front, he gets pressure off. As he goes back around, the pressure builds, he gets more pressure on. As he comes out from behind, pressure off. Remember, horses learn from the release of pressure. If the pressure is constant, there is no release, and it just is stressful for the horse. If you were in this situation, you need to pay close attention to the horse, because it is very common for them, as the horse comes into the tight spot, the pressure building, for the horse there to stop and even stop and reverse. If he were to reverse, you'd have to go after him with the bag, send him back in the appropriate direction, and reassume a position somewhere in the round pen, somewhere off center again, and start over. This is also a good time to remind you of a point I made earlier in this video. He who moves his feet the most loses. Who's standing still in control, and who's running trying to avoid the situation? The person's in control. The horse just hasn't agreed to it yet. Now she is actually getting so close to the fence that, again, the pressure from having to go through there is causing him to literally explode in a canter right behind her. Going in, more pressure, there he goes, really quick. You see it over and over. What does this horse's actions tell you about how much willpower this horse has? This horse has a lot of character. We don't want to destroy that character. We don't want to break his spirit. We just want to win him over. And that's a big difference in this approach with horses. It is not about breaking. It is about empowering, but being in control. There, the horse actually gave her a quick look again, something he has not been doing. And where does the horse stop? Far away, where the pressure is the least. One other thing to notice from this position, the girl is standing with the bag way behind her. As you back up and get closer and closer to the fence, you will need to make sure you begin to keep the bag close to your feet. He gives her another look of respect. Now he actually shakes his head and neck. Horses shaking their head and neck like that is a release of tension. It's a very, very positive thing. In many of the round pen sessions we do, when the horse stops, you see an awful lot of that taking place. You can see his mouth's moving. Look at his top line. His head is down and his mouth is working. He's going in the right direction. Another good point to bring up right here is the question, how well do you think this horse would perform if we were in a 40-foot round pen versus a 60-foot round pen? In other words, how would you get the pressure off of this horse? And as big as this horse is, how well would he be moving in a 40-foot pen? Most important, you probably couldn't get the pressure off of him enough, and he'd keep going and going and going and going. And that is not what you want. The size of this pen matters. You need 55 to 60 feet. Smaller than that can create problems. I've had people comment that the technique I'm showing you here of backing up, getting off center in the round pen, can be dangerous, as you end up with your back up against a fence and a horse going through there. That may be a precarious position. Do you understand that when she came into the pen with this horse, turned him loose, and he was running at her and kicking at her with the horsey finger, that she was in a precarious position from where she started? And notice that as the horse was going around behind her, all the time this happened, the horse was crowding the fence, not crowding her. And that is the normal happening in this event. You obviously always want to pay attention to the horse, and if you think you're at risk, then don't back up too far. But I have never been kicked or hurt by a horse going through this process using this technique. Again, note how low the horse's head is and how much his mouth is working. As opposed to the beginning of this video when he came in, his head was so high. When a horse comes in with his head high, he is coming in to take over the herd. When he comes in with his head low, his mouth moving, and a softness in his body, he is coming in respectful, asking to join your herd. And that is the difference we're looking for here. When you play this video back and forth, you will see what I'm talking about. When the horse gets distracted and looks out of the pen, she's popping the bag to get the horse's attention back on her. At no point in this session do you allow the horse to take his attention away from you. You must get and keep their attention throughout the whole process. Notice again how much his mouth has been working since he stopped this time. That indicates that he is thinking and he is changing. His head is low, his top line is level. That's what we're looking for. That's what you have to get from the horse before anything is going to change in his attitude. Now notice that as he's watching her so intently, he actually takes a step towards her. A small step, but that's a very important step. That was a try. Also notice what she's doing. She's been standing still for 10 minutes. Each one of those little steps is very important. He is wanting to come join her herd. He's not sure about it, but he's trying. And you must be still and quiet, inviting him in. This is a big deal for this horse. This is a really big deal. Often a horse like this, whose initial response to her trying to take control of him was to run and run and run to get away. When they get in that mindset of run, run, run to get away, in many cases they're not thinking, they're not changing, they're not focused on anything but running. And the last thing you want is to have your horse conditioned or associating when you're around that he needs to run and run and run and run to get away from you. That is not what you want. You want your horse to associate being with you as a pleasant thing, so the horse tends not to run away from you, but if anything, to run to you, to gravitate towards you and think that being with you is the best place he can be. Again, another small step indicating the horse is still thinking, still changing, and still trying, and that's important. Now he's really moving. He's actually gone forward towards her a bit. Another point to consider, when you're working with a horse in a session like this, it is important for you to decide when is a good time to stop. When she got this horse to stop and quit running around, that would have been a reasonable accomplishment and a good high point to stop on. When the horse turned and took a step towards her, that would have been a good time to stop. Anytime the horse accomplishes something in the right direction, something positive, that's a good place to stop. So we could have stopped with this horse anywhere along here. Anytime he took a step, anytime he tried to come in, when he put his head down and his mouth work, any of those positive responses would have been a good time to stop. But he's still changing, he's still progressing, so we're not going to stop yet. I often tell people that the distance from the horse on the rail to standing next to the human is a very short distance, but it's a very, very important trip for the horse to take. When you're putting your horse through this process, if you're watching the horse and you're wondering, am I doing anything, or is this over, or am I wasting my time, or is he still changing? All of those questions that we ask as we're learning this, watch the horse. If his tail's moving, his head's moving, his ears are moving, his eyes are moving, if he's looking around, if his head's going up and down, if those little actions are taking place, he's still thinking, still processing information, and things still may change. If he's got his eyes droopy, nothing's moving, and he looks like he's about to go to sleep, then you probably should have already sent him off, approached him, or done some other technique to get things back on track. One more positive aspect of what we've seen here. How long has this horse been still now? Do you understand he's been stopped for a number of minutes? And our goal, I said earlier, when he wants to run and run and run and run, was what? The goal was to get him to stop. So have we accomplished one of our goals? Yes, we have. Also, if any of you think this horse stopped because he's exhausted, you don't know this horse. He's an eventing horse, and he is what you might call warmed up, but he is a long way from being tired. Now, as the horse gets a bit distracted, she pops the bag to get his attention back, but I have her walk a couple of steps towards the horse, approaching him, just to put a little more pressure back on and to remind the horse, hey, pay attention to me. And once again, he responds by working his mouth. His top line is still level, his head is still low, and he's still pretty still. And at last, he finally turns and faces her directly. A very positive step. Notice his look, his demeanor, his squared up feet. That's a very respectful look for the horse. Once again, I asked her to take a step forward to move a little closer to the horse. If you notice the horse looking to his left and looking to his right, kind of like he did earlier. He might be looking for a way out. He might be thinking, well, maybe I should just walk away off to that direction or off to this direction. If the horse were to turn and walk to one side, she could quickly move in that direction to herd the horse to a stop, as you saw in a previous video. When the horse was running around and around and around, she'd probably have trouble just moving her body and herding the horse from side to side to get him to stop. He might have gone ballistic and he probably would have run her over. Now that he's calmed down and been stationary, she probably has enough control that if he does try to walk off to the side, she can move quickly and get him to stop. We'll see.
If he gives you control of him, that's a mental step. That's very powerful. Take another step towards him.
A good move. Her moving towards him got him to face her and turn towards her directly. A good step. People don't realize how much the simple movement of your body, approaching the horse, going away from the horse, moving sideways around the horse, all of those things apply pressure to the horse, and that will change often the way he faces or perceives you. All of that is important, trying to get the horse to face you and come in. Each time she loses the horse's attention, she pops the bag to get the attention back on her.
I always find it very interesting in these classes.
Throughout this whole process, she has been very good at keeping this horse's attention on her. You can notice the horse is very attentive, his ears are up, his head is not up, and that's good. His tail's moving around. This horse is still thinking, and that's pretty obvious. One of the biggest problems people have initially with this kind of work is keeping their attention where it should be. In other words, staying focused on what you're doing and what the horse is doing. Because when it gets calm and quiet like this, it's very easy to daydream, to think about what you're going to do tomorrow, to wonder if this is working, and all the other thoughts that we can have running through our head. As I have her go step by step closer and closer to the horse, she is watching for his bubble to make sure that she doesn't take a step and force him to leave. She wants him to stay still, or better yet, come join her herd, but she does not want him to turn and run off. Do you see that she just found his bubble? She kept going closer and closer, and then all of a sudden she hit that spot where it forced him to move. That is the bubble. His initial response was to move away, but he immediately turns back and actually comes in close to her, almost close enough to touch. Notice his head is down. He is much more respectful than the way he started out, and that has been our goal all along. When I have people in this position in the round pen, I usually have to remind them to do something very important, and that is to breathe. It's very easy to get tense and nervous when something like this is going on. It's also very easy to get really, really happy when the horse actually does turn and come into you and look so focused. Still need to breathe, still need to relax, and you do need to stay focused on the horse.
You'd like to see that right front foot come up. You have it square up a little bit. Okay, that's good.
This owner is being very focused. Notice the horse simply moved his head and took his attention away, and she immediately popped the bag one time, correctly as could be, and got him to put his head back on her. This lady is doing a very, very good job with this. When she popped the bag to get his attention, do you notice how she did it? She didn't wave it up over her head. She simply moved it one crisp movement. Now, once the horse and the person and everything is kind of settled, we may want to interject some movement here to see if we can get something to happen. So I'm going to have the girl take a couple of steps sideways and see how changing her position to the horse affects the horse, and see if we can't get him to move his feet and come to her, or at least turn and face her. He walked around, circled a bit, but came back towards her. The main point being, he didn't leave. In the beginning of this session, all he wanted to do was leave.
Take one step towards it. One more. Okay, lean forward. A lean is a trot.
Finally, He softly walks up to her and touches her gently, asking to join her herd. That's what we've been looking for. You may find that once your horse comes in and gets this close to you again, he may tend to revert back and think, you know, I don't think I'm really going to give in to her. I may take charge again. And the horse may come in and he may bump you or tap you or push you slightly. If he does anything when he's this close that you consider assertive on his part, wave the bag dramatically and back him up, or if not, even send him off. Here he gets just a little bit pushy around her face, and I have her pop the bag one time behind to get him to pull his head away and get respectful, which he immediately did. You also notice when she did that, his head dropped and his mouth was moving. So do you need to hit a horse or hurt a horse to make a point or to discipline the animal? The answer is no. Again, notice his top line. Notice the softness apparent in this horse. Softness that was not there when he was so defiant earlier on. Now, after they've been together briefly, we actually have her walk away from the horse. Now you'll notice that as she moves sideways around the horse, attempting to get the horse to turn and follow her, his head doesn't follow her, and he certainly didn't turn towards her. So that's what we need to work on. But he does drop his head and his mouth is going again, so he at least is thinking. You need to be able to evaluate the horse as you go, so you know how connected you are and what you need to work on next. And now, to everyone's surprise, he actually does turn and walk towards her. Do you see how long that took? And do you understand that if she hadn't been willing to wait, she would have missed it? Very important. As I said before, once the horse does come to you like this, it is important that you don't immediately go do something else. Give the horse a little time to enjoy this and think about it, and to be sure that he knows what he did is what you want. Now I'm going to have her go over to the fence and get rid of the bag and trade that for her lead line. This time, as she walks away, the horse goes with her. The horse is making big progress, and these are very important steps for this horse and this owner. Now when she picks up the lead line, what do you anticipate the horse is expecting to have happen? Probably expecting to have it hooked on. So don't do that. So pick up the rope, but don't put it on the horse. Now in this situation, the horse actually kind of sticks his nose in her face like saying, let's get going. And that's an act of assertiveness on his part. So I get her to wave the rope, which she's not exactly sure how to do at first, but to wave the rope and use the animation of the rope as she would have the animation of the wand and plastic bag if she needs to discipline the horse. I then tell her just to walk forward and see what the horse does. She takes off like a rocket, and I tell her to slow down and wait for the horse. And the horse comes along too. But she started off so quick that the horse started quick, and he actually overshot her when she stopped because he wasn't expecting her to stop. But he does stop, and he does turn back and face her, and his top line is low, and his head is down, and it looks good. Now I have her hook the lead line on and remind her that she needs lots of slack in the rope. You don't be grabbing the buckle or the lead line up close to the halter. Give the horse his freedom to some degree by having lots of slack in the rope. Once she has the lead line on the rope, or if you're doing this with your horse the same, walk around. Turn to your left, turn to your right, stop, go forward, kind of what she's doing here. See where the horse wants to follow well, and find out if there's any places where the horse doesn't. Any place he doesn't respond well, those are areas you need to work on repeatedly. Simply use the animation of movement in the rope to discipline the horse the same as you would with the wand or the bag previously. Now what you can't see off camera is that I just opened the gate. The horse knows the gate opened. He knows it's time to go out the gate, so he turns and looks at the gate. But I'm going to have her go in the opposite direction away from the gate. Then I have her turn towards the gate, and as she gets close to the gate, then turn away from the gate again to see what the horse is doing. Is he paying more attention to the gate, or is he paying more attention to her? Now when she stopped, he kind of kept going and meandering around. Had she flipped the rope, the slack of the rope, up in his face, that would have brought his attention back on her and stopped it sooner than she did. She heads for the gate again, this time walking right on past the gate. And again, the horse looks out as if to say, aren't we going this way? When you stop and think about it, usually when you open a gate, where do you and the horse go? Through the gate. That means the horse is learning to go through gates. Doesn't mean the horse is following you. Following you is far more important. Notice the consistent slack in the rope, giving the horse a degree of freedom as she moves. Once again, the horse walks a little past her, and I ask her to pick up the rope to get his attention back on her. He got distracted by the poop. She pulls on it once, the horse looks, but then goes right back, and she pulls on the rope again, and now the horse looks back at her. Now I have her walk back towards the gate, and when she gets to the gate, she stops. But notice the horse doesn't. He is going to go out the gate. So she uses the rope to get the horse's attention back on her. And think about this. When she stopped and the horse kept going towards the gate, where was the horse's attention? It was on the gate. Where is it supposed to be? On you. She uses the rope quickly and effectively and backs the horse up to where he should have been in the first place. No pain, no struggle, just effective communication and discipline. What this video didn't show was what we had to do to get the horse in the pen. We had to move chairs and make a very big path just for her to get him in. Coming out, he walks out through the chairs and everything else like nothing matters but following her. A very successful session. This next horse, this is Romeo. He just returned from a $1,500 a month trainer who, after a period of training, deemed this horse untrainable. His owners had a lot of problems with the horse, and as you notice, to get the horse in the round pen required having another horse led in front of it. She has to have a chain on the horse's nose. And as she begins to take the chain off and take the halter off, notice the look in the horse's eyes. He is not paying attention to the owner. His attention is everywhere else. He is actually trying to be anywhere else he could be. When she finally gets things loose, watch what happens when she pulls the halter off. He bolts away. Now the owner turns to leave the pen, simply walking towards the gate. Except Romeo comes charging back over, and she begins to back up. In fact, she jumps back out of the way to keep from being run over by her own horse. Romeo is not a bad horse. I'm going to go in with the pen first and work with Romy to see how he responds. Then we'll have the owner come in and see how she does with the horse. He's very pushy, crowding me at the gate, so I use the bag to get him away from me. Whenever you deal with an aggressive horse or an assertive horse, use the bag to get the horse to withdraw, like I did right there. Get yourself in position in the middle, and then all you want to do is get the horse's attention and send him off in the opposite direction he is going. The horse tries to go forward, and I respond by sending him off the opposite way. Now this horse is a good example of the idea that you don't need dozens of laps. He tried to test me there, and I simply used the bag to get him going the way I said. This is about control. Send the horse around a lap or two, and now quickly reverse the horse the other direction. The more defined and specific you are in your request, the better things will go. He didn't really like the banner on the far end of the round pen, and he kept coming away from that. So I began to send him a little more pressure with the bag to push him more out on the rail as he came around. I reverse him again and send him back the other way. And then I stop and get quiet. Romeo's thinking about this. He does another lap, stops, turns, walks up. Initially, notice how high his head is. If he came into me with his head high, I would send him off. But he drops his head and comes in polite and soft. I spent a few minutes with Romeo moving around, changing direction, getting him to follow me, and much to everyone's surprise, it took very little time for Romeo and I to connect. I would move and he would come with me. His head was down. He was never aggressive, never pushy, never tried to bite. He was very nice. And it didn't take very long to get that way. This is a prime example of a horse who in someone's hands was deemed untrainable. And yet if you watch him here, he's actually a really neat horse. A lot of spirit, a lot of spunk. And as you can see by the way he towered over me, 17-hand horse is not something that I can bully. Now we're going to get the owner to go in and give it a try. And notice as soon as she walks to the gate, Romeo is open for business and ready to come out. He really wants to go someplace else. So I get her to use the bag as I did. But notice how as she walks around the horse, whenever he moves, she backs up. She's somewhat intimidated by the horse, and their past history makes that understandable. When she stops, he is coming right in to take over the herd, head high. So I coach her to use the bag and keep him at a distance. Now he starts to meander off, so it's time to send him off. She sends him off correctly. She's not too sure about the bag. She's backing up, which she shouldn't be doing. That shows him that she's timid. And she's trying to figure out how to use the wand in the bag as she works through her process. That's okay. She's never done this before. This is her first try. There goes Romeo giving her a kick, a nice horsey finger. You all know what that means. It means the same thing in the horse world it does in the human world. Romeo goes around and actually looks pretty good. As I coach her in using the bag, she gets better and better with her technique. She turns him crisply and sharply, and he responds very well. He's still cutting in from the other side. That's not as much aggression as it is him wanting to not be near that big banner over there that he was so afraid of. Hard to think of a 17 one-hand horse like this that's afraid. Many of them are actually very timid. You will also notice the horse keeps testing her, trying to reverse on her. He didn't do that much with me. Do you know why? Because the horse didn't know me from Adam. He'd never seen me before. This horse knew her, and they have a history together. There he goes. He's trying to test her in reverse again, so she quickly has to send him back off. Every time he tests her, she must win. There he goes, testing her again, trying to reverse on her. She's using the bag, but she's not being assertive enough. She'll work on it. There he tests her again. Gee, why is he testing her so much? And he didn't test me but a couple of times. He knows her. He didn't know me. Most people, when they walk in a pen with a horse like this, a horse who has a reputation for being dangerous, a horse who is supposed to be a problem, and a horse who, of course, at 17-1 dwarfs me quite readily, most of you would be so concerned. What is the horse going to do? And I'm going to give you something else to think about instead. The horse doesn't know what you're going to do, and you should use that to your advantage.
Wiggle it a little bit and get his ear, but don't let him go the opposite direction. Get his ear. That's it. Go, go, go.
There goes Romeo trying to reverse on her again. She quickly sends him back off. Now, as she sees that he is responding when she asks for something, and as she gets more comfortable using the wand in the bag, she is becoming a little more positive and a little more assertive. That's a normal situation. Romeo stops on the corner and waits. Let's see if he goes the way we want. His head goes down, he turns, and he walks in. Notice the difference in the way he came in this time than the way he came in 4 minutes and 25 seconds ago. This time his head was low, respectful. Now if he gets a little pushy, she uses the bag to back him off, and that worked quite well. Again, his head goes down and his mouth is moving. Quite a change for 4 minutes and 25 seconds of work. She moved him around a couple of times. She walked and he followed. And they began to connect very nicely. Now as she puts the halter on, something outside of the pen spooks him and he jumps. But she doesn't run away, and he didn't run away either. They stayed together. He gets a little pushy when she tries to reach for the halter, and she wiggles the rope to get him to back off. He does, and she hooks on the chain. Now I don't use chains, so I wouldn't let her run it over his nose the way she brought him in. She simply hooked it on the side of the halter. Now we're going to have her walk off, wander around, and see what Romy does with her this time. Notice his head is low. Notice when she moves, he moves. He is shadowing her and following her. The rope's a little bit too short, and they're kind of bumping into that. So I'm going to have her lengthen the rope. When she stopped there, Romy wasn't paying enough attention and he bumped into her. So she got animated and he backed up a step and gave her space, exactly as she should have done. She stands there and waits and lets Romy think. And that's a very big step. When she moves, he moves. When she stops, he stops. That's the way it's supposed to look. Loose rope, no stress. Person and horse working like a team. Now when she wanders away, I'm going to open the gate and use the gate as a distraction. The horse knows the gate's open. So when we head back for the gate, remember how the horse kept crowding the gate at the beginning of this session? The minute she went to the gate, when the horse was on the inside and she was on the outside of the pen, the horse was there wanting out. Now the gate's open. Let's see how the horse responds this time. He's leading her away. So she stops and goes the other direction. He says, wait a minute, the gate's open, let's go out the gate. She says, no, I'm in charge. You follow me. And unlike before, he says, okay. Now he would like to go to the gate. You can tell he's looking at the gate. She made a somewhat feeble attempt there to wiggle the rope and get his attention. And it was okay. She should have done that rope movement a little bit more dramatic to make it work. Notice he raised his head up over her head when she stopped quickly so as not to bump into her. Now she's using the rope effectively to tell him, no, you can't walk past me. He still wants to go out the gate, and she says, no, you're going to stay here with me. They're discussing that at the moment. His mouth's moving. He's thinking. And she's not letting him go. She is holding her ground. Matter of fact, we're going to go away from the gate if you want to go there so badly. She turns him one way and then the other. And as they approach the gate, again she stops. He walks a little past. She flips the rope one time and he takes a step back. He looks back at her as if to say, well, aren't we going? No, we're going to go away from the gate again. Romeo's job is to follow her, not to take control, and not to decide when we go through the gate or where we go. Now they head for the gate again, and again he starts to walk past. So now she's getting better with the rope. She's being more defined. His mouth is moving. And notice whose feet are moving less. Remember, he who moves his feet the most loses. Romeo's trying to go for the gate, and she's saying no. He says, but come on, the gate's open. She says, nope. Now Romy tries for the gate again, and this time she uses the rope and backs him up some more, keeping him under control, keeping his attention on her. Notice how much his mouth is moving. Now she starts towards the gate and walks out with the horse. He got a little ahead of her, but the smile on her face when she looks back at me there tells you this is not the way this horse is used to being led. This was a major change for this lady and this wonderful horse, who had a reputation that he did not deserve.
Anna? Good bull.
That was Romeo, right?
That's Romeo.
This is a somewhat stoic Appaloosa and a nice lady who is a bit timid with her horse. She gets the bag and begins. The horse immediately comes over to see what's going on. The horse is exploring and she backs up. Notice that is not a good sign to give the horse. If you back away, the horse is in charge. So I have her wiggle the bag to get the horse's attention, and the horse just calmly meanders away. She heads for the middle, and we're going to send the horse off the opposite way he's facing. She's thinking about this.
Get it back. There's the lip. Get his ear. More. Good.
She uses the bag to get the horse going, and the horse is a bit resistant at first, finally starts to go.
Go in the bag.
She does a couple of laps, plans ahead, gets way in front of the horse, and uses the bag to reverse the animal the way she should. She gets the horse to do a couple of laps. She's paying good attention. The horse is going in a nice little trot. And then again, we have her reverse the horse one more time. This time she actually gets pretty much in front of the horse and starts to cut him off. I have to coach her away from that, and she gets back behind the horse where she should be, and it works out pretty well. Again, when she reverses the horse the next time, she still tends to rush up in front of the horse. As you've noticed already, this is a very, very common problem. When you want the horse to go, you should be focused on his butt, not his head. And it is very common for people to head across the pen, cutting the horse off. And that body language tells him to go the opposite way you're actually wanting him to go. Pay attention to that as you're working with your horses. She gets one more very nice reverse, and now it's time to stop and get quiet. Remember, we don't need 800 laps before we can stop. If you get the horse to reverse 3 or 4 times, if you get the horse to do 4, 5, or 6 laps, that's fine. Now stop, get quiet, and let's see what happens. It appears we may have another horse who wants to go and go and go in order to avoid giving in. So at some point, we're going to have her back up, step at a time, and see if we can't change the horse. Change the pressure on the horse by getting off center in the pen.
Keep the bag on the ground. Good. When he comes out from behind you over there, take back 1 step.
All of a sudden, as the horse is coming into the pressure area where she is closest to the fence, the horse says, whoops, don't want to do this, and tries to reverse. She does an admirable job of getting around and changing the horse's direction back to the way it should have been going. Remember, when you tell the horse to go that way, his only choice is to go that way. When you stop and get quiet and ask the horse to come in, his only choice is to keep going the way you said or stop and come in. Once again, the little app has decided he's just going to keep going. He's not going to give in. So we go back to our approach of taking a step back, getting off center to change the pressure on the horse. You can't see it on the video, but right along here, his mouth moved a little bit. Not much, but a little. First time it had moved since he's been in the pen. One mistake a lot of people make when they're in the middle of the pen trying to do this approach is they don't stay facing the same direction. So they end up backing around the circle in the pen. If you're trying to get off center and to get a horse who doesn't want to stop, you need to stay facing the same direction. Take a step back, take a step back, take a step back. Notice as this little horse goes around and around, he's not stressed, he's not wired, he's just not giving in. He says, I can keep going like this for a long time. Sooner or later, I'll find a way out. That attitude has to change. As she gets closer and closer to the fence, it's important to make the steps smaller and smaller. Because once you're only 12 or 15 feet from the fence, one big step is a major change. So the closer you get to the fence, the smaller each step back should be. You'll also notice, as we talked about with the earlier gray horse, that this particular horse, when he gets behind her, is crowding the fence, not crowding her.
Make your steps smaller. You're getting too close to the fence. That's causing the change too quick. Closer you get to the fence, smaller your steps. See him right there, veer off. See how close to the fence he is now? A lot of them will come up, slow down, and they'll hit right here, and they'll just speed up and bolt through there.
Finally, he decides he's had enough, and he actually tries to reverse. And he does it in a very feisty way. She responds very well and gets the horse back going the direction he should be. Since she got back a little bit more in the center, I have her face the original direction she was facing, so we can begin to back up again. If the horse tried to reverse and you had to go away from your location to send the horse back in the appropriate direction, you don't need to go back to the exact same spot in the round pen to start over again. You can stop wherever you end up. Just once you have stopped, make sure that you stay facing the same direction then, so you are backing in a straight line across the pen. When you see her jump with the bag, she thought the horse was going to reverse, and she almost overreacted. Finally, he slows down, and as the pressure is building behind her, where it's closest to the pen, that pressure causes him to stop right in front of the gate. We wanted him to stop, and we got it to happen. That's good. It's very important when you get a horse to stop at this point, when you're at the very beginning of a session, that you need to keep their attention, as we've said before. So if you lost the horse's ear or eye and he stopped paying attention, you would want to wiggle the bag, pop the bag to get that attention back. However, you want to be very careful in how much you use the bag, because you don't want to run the horse off once you got him to stop after he was so interested for so long in running. So you would use the bag, but use it very judiciously. That little snort and head shake got his mouth moving. That was a positive step. We need to see his mouth move if this horse is going to change. Now watch him, he's starting to back up. He looks like he might be fixing to reverse. He's thinking about reversing, but is he going to? And if he tries to reverse, she can't let him get away with that. There's a look. He turns to look at her. That's something. When you're working with a horse like this, they may go to the rail and turn away from you. That's not what you want, but if that's what they do, that's what you've got to deal with. They may stop, turn, and give you just a quick look. If they do that, that's good. It's not as good as coming in, but it's what you're going to have to work with. They may look at you for a long time. That's better. They may look at you and then turn towards you. All these are different progressive steps of the same process. He moved his head, moved his mouth, but basically stood pretty still. So she gave him 3 minutes to see if he was going to change, and he really decided to stay where he was. Now she begins to approach the horse to see if she can get him to move his feet. She takes a few steps and stops, waits, then takes a few more steps. And there, actually, the horse does turn to look at her. She actually got up within about 8 or 10 feet of the horse, stopped, stood there for a while, and the horse didn't really seem to be paying much attention. So I suggested just turn and walk away. Much to her surprise, when she turned and walked away, notice what the horse did.
Turn around.
Sometimes the simplest changes in your position, the simplest changes in your action, can get the horse to do what you wanted him to do. Much of what we're doing in this situation with this horse and this person is working on respect issues. This horse likes this lady, likes her a lot, but the horse doesn't respect her to the level that we need to have happen. That's what we are trying to change. Many of you have the same situation with your horse. You have a horse you've treated very well. You love the horse, and the horse likes you a lot, but the horse doesn't respect you. And respect is far more important. If they respect you, they'll like you. But a lot of them like you and don't respect you. Finally, the horse decides he's stood there long enough. He shakes his head, relaxes, and calmly turns to walk away. He's not as focused on the person as he needs to be. So I have her go to send the horse off again. I have her begin to reverse the horse and then reverse the horse again. Her technique is pretty good. She's doing very well. And the horse is responding quite well also. You will notice when she asks the horse to reverse, he doesn't immediately reverse. He actually tests her several times here by trying to keep going. Then when he does get turned the way he should have turned, she starts to get back in front of him again. Notice when I'm cautioning her about cutting the horse off, she actually backs up. It's very important for those of you that may be a bit timid around horses to get over the idea of backing up. I know it's easy to say and it's not always easy to do, but when you back up in front of a horse like that, you are telling him he's in charge. And he reads that and he will obey it and he will take charge.
Face his butt, not his head. There you go. Your body should be facing his butt, not facing his head. Okay, behind your back, reverse direction. Good. Stay at his butt, stay at his butt. Do not face his head.
Now this time when I ask her to reverse the horse, she's a little slow and the horse bolts forward, runs past her, and gets away. Horse 1, person 0. That happened because her awareness was not as much as the horse's awareness. He saw what was happening and he says, I'm not going to do it, and bolted forward. And he did that before she was able to react and stop it from happening. Now as he was going past her, she overreacted and started trying to chase him. If you do that, you will frequently drive the horse into the fence. So once the horse gets past you, or it looks like he's going to get past you, let go of the horse, and the correct thing to do would be to diagonally go directly across the pen and cut the horse off on the other side. Forget about right here, because he's already gotten past you. It also makes sense that if the horse tested you and got away with it last time you tried to reverse him, the next time you try to reverse him, he's going to test you again. So anticipate that and be prepared to deal with it. Notice now, when she gets more defined in how she tries to reverse the horse, he gets much quicker in his ability to respond to her. In other words, he turns really well. So at this point, I decide I'm going to coach the lady into moving sideways and herd the horse to a stop. We've discussed that previously. But she's not too sure, so she starts to throw the bag out, and I immediately get her to stop. She lets the horse reverse, and it gets a little chaotic, but we're going to work her through this. As you watch her run side to side trying to herd this horse to a stop, she does an admirable job of doing something she's never done before and trying to control this horse. You also will see the horse's attitude come up as he's saying, no, I am not going to let you control me. And she does. And son of a gun. Then, much to the surprise of both the horse and the person, she gets the horse to stop. And once the horse stops, he turns and looks at her as if to say, what the heck got into you today? When you can control a horse while he's loose, that has far more impact on the mind of the horse than if you can only control him when you are tied or have some equipment involved. Now since he's not moving and she's facing the wrong end of the horse, I'm going to have her approach the horse to see if we can elicit a response from him. As she approaches, he gives her occasional looks, but you can tell by looking at this horse, he is not willing to join her herd yet. The horse decides I've had enough of this and decides to walk off. She begins to move sideways again. She gets confused and starts to use the bag, so I have to coach her out of that. But she then moves back and forth to get the horse to stop again. This time it only takes her a few seconds to stop the horse. She's getting better with the technique, and the horse is figuring out that she's going to be in charge. Another thing to point out is that when you're working with a horse in the round pen, when the horse is going clockwise, you are on his right. When the horse is going counterclockwise, you are on his left. You need to work the horse from both sides. In other words, you need to stop the horse going clockwise, and then you also need to stop the horse going counterclockwise, because often they will give you a very different response from one side than the other. You need to work with both. The horse gives her one look, but is not showing any sign of turning, so I have her begin to approach the horse's head again. As she approaches, he actually turns and looks at her with his head. He is only giving her short, quick little looks. The longer the look, the greater the respect. As she gets closer to the horse, he gives her those occasional little quick looks. Not very respectful and not very attentive. He likes her, but he doesn't respect her yet.
One more step. Good. Back up 4 or 5 steps.
Now I have her back away from the horse, taking the pressure off, to see if that gets a response. A horse like this, who is so willing to run and run and run and run to avoid giving in, or to simply stand there and turn his butt towards you and look the other way, is a horse that has a lot of attitude. He tends to avoid his issues and not face things the way he should. Horses like this are sometimes considered to be really nice because they don't do a lot out of line. But there is that attitude just under the surface, and sometimes when it comes to that surface, it does so with an explosion, and the people go, "Where did that come from?" And they end up with a real horse problem. This time as she backs up, the horse's head does come with her very briefly, and that is a good step. This is one of the safest and best ways to first evaluate your horse's attitude and then to observe it in action. And do you understand what I mean by that? When we're watching this horse not give in, when you're watching this horse want to run around or stand there with his butt to you, that's an attitude. He is not eagerly joining the herd like some of the other horses you've seen previously. You need to understand that attitude is present in this horse. And this is also the best way I've found to work through and change those attitudes in horses like this. I'd also ask you to think about the fact that a horse like this, who displays so much attitude, who in many cases can be a serious problem, is not a bad horse. This is actually a horse that you would really want to have, because when you can get inside his head and when you can win over his mind, when you can get rid of that attitude and change it, then in many cases the character which allowed the attitude to arise in the first place, you will still have in the horse. And this is a horse that would die for you if they really, really wanted to follow you. This is a horse that would do anything for you. And that kind of character you can't buy. So don't misunderstand that a horse like this, showing you behaviors you don't like to see, is a bad horse. That would be a mistake. This is a very good horse. He just needs a little attitude adjustment. I might also suggest to you that horses like this are frequently the kind of horse that put into an aggressive or forceful situation where some roughneck decides, I'm going to make this horse do what I want. The horse may go to war with you, and it won't be pretty. We don't need to go to war with them to change their attitudes. We simply need to understand how to get it to change. And many times, the first step in that change is for us to be able to observe the attitude and understand it. And that's a lot of what we're trying to do with these horses here.
More. He can look at that as the thing he wants to look at, but he cannot ignore you. See now, we're going to, oh, there we go, good, there we go. Head shake, mouth work.
Now at this point, I think everyone can see that this horse is a bit stuck. He is not changing. So we may need to go a little bit further in trying to help him change. One way to do that would be to go back to the technique of putting your hand on his nose and physically turning his body. In other words, getting his feet to move. He's stuck mentally, but that is displayed by the stationary position of his feet. If you can get his feet to move, conversely, that will also let him work his mind. It will free up his thinking. As the feet move, so goes the horse. If the feet aren't moving, you're in trouble. If the feet are moving too fast, erratically, or out of control, you're in trouble. Now she does a pretty good job of applying this technique. She has her hand over the horse's nose, and the goal is to turn the horse so that his front feet move. If you back up away from the horse and get your body too far from the horse, it gets too easy for the horse to simply jerk his head and get away from your hand. So you want to keep your body close to his shoulder. And she does a very good job of moving her body close to his shoulder and turning the horse and moving his front end. From this position, since her back was to the fence, I'm going to have her repeat the same action, but this time I'm going to have her step into the horse and turn him away from her, getting them more towards the middle of the pen where they've got room to work. When you do this, you only need a step or so. Notice that she gets the horse going. She's pretty happy about it, so she just keeps right on going until the horse is turning all the way around, and I have to actually yell, "Stop, stop," to get her to stop the horse. Remember, if you ask for something from the horse, and you keep going and going and going, he doesn't know that he did the right thing. He learns from the release of pressure.
You only need a step or two so he knows what you're asking for. Now let go.
Now she takes her hand away. Also note, if this horse were really dangerous, if he really hated her, if he was really aggressive, he wouldn't tolerate this. Matter of fact, if he was too aggressive, she'd have never gotten her hand on his head in the first place. And were you to try to use this technique and the horse kept jerking his head away or raising it up so you can't get to his nose, then what you would need to do is control the situation by perhaps sending the horse off. You get him to soften up and become somewhat receptive by sending him off. When you get in close like this, you want to fine-tune that receptiveness on his part and see how good he can become. There's another very important aspect of this type of technique that I want you to be aware of. When you put your hand on the horse's head and you ask him to say turn or back up, if he backs up softly with ounces of pressure, what you are feeling is a lack of resistance in the horse's attitude. He is yielding to you. On the other hand, if you put your hand on his head and ask him to back up, and you end up pushing and pushing and pushing with all you've got, and he's still not moving, you are feeling a physical manifestation of the attitude present in the horse. In other words, he's being a butt, and now you can feel how much of a butt he is being. Your goal with this exercise is to be able to A, evaluate how much resistance he has, and B, work him through that, and C, get his feet moving. Now here's a good example of something you may run into. She's a little confused about which way to go with the horse, and she's not close enough to the horse, and as she backs up to move the horse or turn the horse towards her, he just jerks his head away. That will happen. When it does, simply go back, get a hold of the horse, and start over again. Now she lets go of the horse and backs up 4 or 5 steps. She's backing up to see if the horse is willing to come to her, and so far he's not. Once again, I ask her to turn and walk away from the horse. They've been working together quite a while. They need a little bit of a break. When she turns and walks away, he doesn't follow her, which he had done earlier. Probably the reason he didn't follow her now is because now she's starting to be specific. She's starting to ask him to give to her. He's willing to follow her when he came in, but only because he liked her, not because she was in charge. Now that she's trying to be in charge, he has still got an attitude. Now this time as she approaches the horse, he's kind of facing away from her. So I have her get directly behind the horse. Most horses are not real comfortable when someone's directly behind them. That's where their vision is the poorest, and they got to turn their head in order to see what's going on back there. If you do decide to directly approach the rear of a horse, always be very careful. if you get too close, you could get kicked if the horse has an attitude that way. So watch what you're doing. It's a good technique to use, but it's also good to keep a safe distance. Now I have her move somewhat to the other side of the horse and start an approach from that direction. This lady spent the next 11 minutes moving this horse gently in various different directions, every way possible, to try and get this horse unstuck. If I were to use the word independent to describe this horse, would you understand what you're seeing? After so much time trying to get the horse unstuck, I have the lady go back in front of the horse to where we're going to start over again. And the horse, much to her surprise, actually takes a step towards her. Notice the way the horse looks around before he does it. It's a small step, but it's a big try, and it's the first major step this horse has made towards this lady in a submissive fashion in the pen. Now carefully watch the horse. Watch his back leg, watch his front legs, watch his head go up and down, and watch what happens now. Most profound is the fact that his mouth is beginning to go quite a lot. I'm sorry you can't see that better from the brightness of this video, but it is happening. Notice at this point how attentive and how focused the horse has become on the person. Almost the exact opposite of the attitude towards her this horse has been showing up till now. He at first ran around and around trying to avoid her. Then he turned his butt to her and was totally indifferent. Now look at the focus, look at his top line low, and look at the way he is watching her intently. Finally, after so much effort, he softly puts his head down, walks up to her politely. That was a major, major big deal for this horse, and it took a lot of effort on her part to achieve it. But it is a very, very important thing for this horse to be next to her and respectful. He is asking to join her herd for the first time. At this point, everybody in this workshop was ecstatic. They were clapping and cheering because this horse made a big, big commitment. It was a great deal. I think the owner was pretty happy too. It is also very important that when the horse does this, that you not overreact. You have to stand still, be calm, be quiet, and let the horse know this is what we wanted you to do. You have to act like an alpha. And that's sometimes hard to do. Because right about now, you want to reach over and just pet the heck out of this horse because he's done so well. His mouth has been going almost non-stop since he started to walk up towards her. He's thinking, he's soft, he's relaxed. You can look at his body, and even though his head was not really high before, his body was braced. He was not soft and submissive. Right now, he's very soft and very submissive. That's the way you want a horse to look. This may seem like this took forever to you, and it did take quite a while. As you've seen, many horses don't take near this long. But this was a big deal for this horse. This horse needed to have this done. And this horse is better off because it was accomplished. This horse and this owner will be much more connected now than they had been before. 57 minutes seems like a long time, but 57 minutes in the life of a horse is nothing. This next situation is a cute little horse with quite an attitude. It's also the first time we've had a person that was taller than their horse. As our owner starts off with the horse, he does a pretty good job, gets his attention, gets him to go. Horse is a bit reluctant to go, but then he starts to cut him off. And I coach him through not doing that. As we've said before, cutting the horse off when you get him going is the most common problem in a round pen. This horse is quite willing to stop. He really doesn't want to run around. So the owner has to keep popping the bag to get the horse to go. And I'm coaching the owner about making sure that the horse keeps going. In other words, don't let him stop.
I personally don't care if he trots or canters. I'd like to see a nice easy trot. I don't want him walking because that could be resistance because he's not happily going. Stay behind him. You get a little ahead. Stay behind him. Okay, now behind your back.
Notice when the person tries to reverse the horse has this look as if to say, yeah, right. You think I'm going to do that?
Stay behind him. Stay behind him. Good.
This time when he asks the horse to reverse, again the horse tends to not want to go, but then spins, takes off, and actually gives him a very big horsey finger. Notice the next time the owner tries to reverse the horse, how much time the owner is saying, reverse, go the other way, waving the bag, and the horse is just looking at him. That is resistance, folks. When you put your hand out to say go the other way, when you move your body position, when you start to wave that bag, that horse should already be going the other way. And if he's not, you are dealing with attitude. This horse is doing absolutely as little as possible. He is not going fast. He is not doing much. He is trying to resist. It's an attitude. And the same attitude that has a horse stoic or standing around or not wanting to go is the attitude that produced that horsey finger a minute ago.
Point, point, point. Okay, be a little more animated. He's kind of passively resisting you a bit.
And once again, the owner tries to reverse the horse and he is defying the owner. It takes time to get that horse to turn. He is not turning quickly and responsively. That is an expression of resistance in the horse's attitude. You need to understand that. Since the horse is so resistant to reversing, I'm telling the owner to use the bag more and get more assertive. Go forward at the horse. Use the bag harder to get the horse to turn. You cannot accept a non-response, and when you say reverse and the horse says no, that is a non-response. He must respond the way you ask. Finally, he gets the horse to do one pretty good turn. And at that point, we need to stop, get quiet, and let's see what the horse does. Now this little horse does stop. He does turn in. He does start to come in, but he doesn't come in all the way. When the horse gave that response to asking the horse to come in, a conventional round pen approach would have already sent this horse off, would already have this horse back on the rail running. I disagree with that, and it's not necessary.
Why we're not. Same to you. And there goes the mouth. There goes the head.
So the mouth starts to move and the head drops, but instead of coming in, the horse says, I think I've had enough of this. I'm going to wander off here.
They send him off the opposite way, the opposite way, opposite way.
He corrects and now sends the horse off the opposite way. And as the horse comes around the pen, you see the back end of the horse come up and another big horsey finger. The owner does a couple of more reversals. The horse is still resistant, but the owner is getting it to happen. You must get the horse to reverse when you ask for a reverse.
You think if he really wanted to kick you, you could prevent it? Reversing. Reversing behind your back. Mean it, mean it. He's testing you. Mean it, mean it, mean it. Okay, get quiet now.
Now it's time to get quiet again, and let's see what happens with the horse. This time the horse stops, turns in, and heads in towards him, actually a little further than he came the first time, but still stops a few feet away. The horse gets pretty stuck and seems to be going nowhere after about 3 minutes, so I have the owner approach the horse. Over the next couple of minutes, the horse is very focused on the person. The horse does not come any closer, but he was pretty close anyway. So at that point I had the person turn and calmly walk off to one side. The horse not only walked in with him as the person walked away, but he moved in closer to the person as they walked and ended up stopped right next to the person where we wanted the horse to be. Once they stopped, little horse's mouth started going to town. Again, note the position of the horse's head. It is low. His top line is down, and that's what you're after.
The less secure horses, the more insecure? The more insecure, they come closer. Yeah. Well, the more insecure will run around like fruitcakes at first, and then they'll want to sit in your lap. Okay, very gently turn to your left. Keep the bag away.
Now I have the person turn and walk in the other direction, softly and gently, and watch how nicely, softly, and gently the horse follows. As you watch this horse and this person together, moving, or even just standing still, for those people who say, this big guy's not doing nothing, they're wrong. One thing that is very much going on is that this horse is developing a positive association with being next to this person. It's a good deal to be with him. If the horse didn't think it was a good deal, the horse wouldn't be following him in the first place. The image of the horse moving softly with a person like this is so different from the image of the horsey finger. You have to go through the process and get those horsey fingers out of the horse's system in order to get to the softness that you see here. The horsey finger is not what you want, but I'm glad when I see one because I knew it was in there and now it's out. And as you work through those, things always get better. Most people never know the horsey finger is in there until it reaches up and creates a crisis. This way, in the round pen, with the horse at liberty, is one of the safest ways to sort through the attitudes in the horses. Like all the other horses you've seen in this video, whether it be Big Romeo or any of the others, horses with attitudes will need to express it, you need to see it, but you also need to work them through it. And that's what we've been doing with these horses.
Creating a positive association for this horse. Man is in charge, horse is submissive. Man is good, horse is happy. These are very powerful associations that are very beneficial. Now, how about if you just walk right past his shoulder?
So now I have the owner walk right past the horse. So for the horse to follow, he's actually going to have to turn and go in the opposite direction he's facing. And with no cue or signal, the horse does exactly that. Mind you, he's following someone carrying a plastic bag. Most people would not have much luck getting their horse to follow them when they're carrying a plastic bag. How many of you can ride your horse carrying a wand with a plastic bag? You should be able to. You might ask yourself, how many laps does it take to change a horse's attitude? Well, the answer is that it varies from horse to horse. But if you're doing it right, it should be as few laps as possible. Now, another way of moving around the horse to see if the horse will follow you is to simply back up. If you back up, the horse should turn and go with you. Or if you're in front of the horse when you back up, the horse should back up the same. Another tool for evaluating how connected the horse is with you is when you do move like this, either away from the horse, into the horse, especially backing up or moving away from the horse. Watch how far you move before the horse's head begins to move in conjunction with you. In other words, if you take 2 or 3 steps and the horse's head is still looking straight ahead, you're not that connected. But if you start to move and before your foot hits the ground from the first step, the horse's head is turning in your direction, and before your next foot moves, the horse's feet are coming with you, that horse is pretty much in tune. That's what you're after. A couple of other points to reinforce with you. This is a young horse. How long can this horse pay attention? Well, how long has he been paying attention? Doing pretty doggone well, isn't he? And how many times have you heard someone say, boy, I wish I could get this horse to stand still? That's one of the biggest complaints I hear from people when I work with horses all over the place. Can't get my horse to stand still. Well, how many horses have you seen in this process stand for minutes and minutes and minutes at a time? If you watch your horse out in the pasture, he'll stand in the same place sometimes for quite a while. The only reason he can't stand still in other situations is because he's not comfortable. In these situations, we have gotten the horse to be respectful, submissive, and pay attention, and we've made him comfortable enough that he stands right next to us, no matter what, for minute after minute after minute after minute. You want your horse to stand still, you've got to teach him that it's a good thing to do, and this is the best way to get that to happen. Don't tell me I can't get a young horse to stand still. It happens all the time.
Send him off to the opposite way he's facing.
So we send this horse off and reverse it a couple of times. And once again, there's a bit of resistance when you ask the horse to reverse. He's not sure he has to do this. He's still got some attitude in there. And that brings up a point we need to go over. This work is a process. Handling a horse in this fashion is not like flipping a light switch where the light's on or the light's off. This is a process that will go on between you and the horse for the life of the horse. Some horses will test you a lot. Note how long it takes for this handler to turn this horse. Sometimes this horse is really not turning very quick at all. That's attitude, and that's what we're working through. Note that as the owner persists, the turns start to get better. Another thing for you to think about, when we're working with a horse like this, how many laps do you do with a horse before you turn it? Well, actually, you could do 4 or 5 reversals and turns within 1 lap. You could do a half a lap, turn the horse, half a lap, turn the horse. You don't have to run lots of laps. The fewer laps you can do, the better off you both are. The laps don't matter. The response of the horse when you ask for a reversal is what matters. Now, when our handler got quiet, this horse turned and came in nicely, but he didn't come all the way in, which means he's not totally committed to joining your herd. Pretty much what he did before. But let's wait. Let's wait and give him time to think and see what happens. After a minute and a half or so, the horse takes a few more steps towards the handler. He's working his way in. He's only going to come in as fast as he's comfortable. You need to make sure the horse is comfortable. Now, while this horse is coming in and looking so nice, I want to talk about something that we said he was doing. He was resisting the reversal. In other words, the owner was having to really fuss and fuss to get the horse to reverse. One way for you to evaluate this is that, let's say the horse is at a particular place, say in front of the gate, going to the clockwise direction. And as the horse is going by the gate, you begin to switch the wand and bag behind your back, you begin to change your body position, and you begin to ask that horse to reverse. Judge how far the horse goes after the place that you started the reversal. So if you started to reverse him at the gate, and let's say the horse went on 2 or 3 or 4 more panels of the round pen before you actually got him turned, that horse has a lot of resistance. Because if you started to turn that horse at the gate, and his attitude is where it should be, he should turn before he gets past the gate. All the time that horse is going from panel to panel to panel while you're asking him to reverse, he is taking control away from you. When you ask for something, he should give it. And that's the goal you should shoot for. You want to ask him to reverse, and it happens. Right now, quick. In the workshop sessions, when we get a person and a horse close like this, many people wonder, why does Dan just keep talking about different things? Why don't we go ahead and do something else with this horse? And I really want you to get that we are. I may be talking to the crowd in the background, which is what I'm doing in this situation, telling them about this and that, and discussing things the horse did and things to watch out for, other points of information. But I'm watching this person and this horse. Because this person and this horse, as I said before, when they are together with the horse's head down, submissive, the horse came in asking to join his herd, not the other way around. This is a good association for this horse to have. And you make progress sometimes without doing a lot. One other point to consider. When you're working a horse at liberty, that horse is displaying exactly what he feels. There's no chains, no ropes, no other equipment interfering or depressing his ability to express himself. He is showing you what he really thinks. Just the same as when this little horse was showing you the horsey fingers a few minutes ago. That's his attitude. And you need to know what the true attitude of the horse is. And you find that out best by working with the horse when he is loose. Another question that usually comes up when we do a workshop is, do I want the horse to turn into me, or do I want the horse to turn away from me? In these sessions, and each of the horses you have seen, this was their first session with this type of work. I don't really care if they turn in or out. I just want them to turn, and I want them to turn when I ask for it. Now, if they turn in, that's probably a little bit better, but at this point in the game, it's not really critical. Eventually, as you develop your body language, your connection with the horse, and your communication with the horse, you will be able to turn the horse in or out whichever way you want to. But you're not ready for that yet. Right now, all you need to do is get them to turn. The more you observe what they do, the better off you'll both be. And pretty soon, you'll be turning the horse in or out any way you please. Now, the owner goes to his left, as before, and the horse moves nicely. They stop, and then, from the same position they were in a few minutes ago, when the owner backed up and the horse didn't follow, the owner backs up again. This time, the head does follow. So initially it looks like all we get is the head. But very shortly you see the horse begin to move. And when the owner takes one more step back, the little horse actually turns and comes in the way he would not come in a few minutes ago. I have often jokingly called this slow motion horse training. But think about it. When you go slow, you have time to think. You have time to plan. You have time to evaluate what just happened. Too often we do so much with horses, so much, so fast, and so unplanned. It gets to be kind of chaotic. Don't want chaos. As you do this process and work with more and more horses, you aren't always going to go this slow. You're going to be able to go faster. You don't want to speed up just to speed up, but you will speed up as you get more aware of the horse and more effective in your communication with the horse. And that's okay. Don't worry about going fast. Worry about understanding the horse. If you're thinking to yourself, what changed that got this horse to come to him now and not before? It was a few laps and a few turns in the round pen. Primarily the turns and the effectiveness of the person getting the horse to turn when he didn't really want to. That's what changed the horse's attitude. That's what got the horse to come in a way he didn't before. Enough. Here he comes. You need to get your horse to move freely in all different directions, untied and with no coaching. In other words, the horse should become your shadow. No matter where you move, the horse should follow. That's the goal. The more you can move before the horse is moving with you, the more you need to practice. Now we wander over to the gate. The horse happily follows, and we pick up the lead line, trading the bag and the wand for the rope. By the way, what kind of lead line and halter do you have to lead a horse? The answer is none, because you've seen people repeatedly leading their horses all over with this video with no halter, no lead line. They lead the horse with his mind. If he chooses to follow you, you don't need anything. Matter of fact, if he refuses, you probably don't have enough. As you watch these two walk around the pen together, notice how important the rope is. In other words, it's not. Also think about this. If you stop and the horse walks on by, do you understand where the horse's attention was when he walked by you? In other words, it wasn't on you. So when you have a horse walk past you when you stop, that is not a leading problem. That is an attention deficit problem. And work on their attentiveness and you will solve it. Now as you notice the horse looking back, that's because I just had someone open the gate. Whenever you're dealing with a distraction to the horse, such as in this case, we're leading the horse towards an open gate, you should be paying attention to where the horse's attention is. If it's on the gate and the horse starts speeding up, don't get mad. Just get the horse's attention back on you. And do that by some animated movement of the lead line. If you think the horse's attention is going to the gate or out of the gate, you can also address that by turning the horse away from the gate the minute you see him taking his attention off of you. Because when you turn him, that will bring his attention back onto you. As another way of looking at it, anytime you're working with a horse and there is a distraction, move yourself away from the distraction, drawing the horse's attention back onto you. Watch the little horse when the owner stops. Horse did real well, but he took one too many steps. And then after he stopped, he kind of inched his way up and took one more step. Another technique would be to do what he's doing now, which is to back up a step. See what the horse does. Now as they turn to walk back towards the gate, I asked him to walk past the gate, and he kind of walked into the gate. So it got a little confusing, and the horse and him both got kind of confused. That's okay. Also notice as he gets close to the gate, the handler begins to shorten the lead line. That's an error. And when they turn to go back away from the gate, the horse is saying, wait a minute, it's open. Why aren't we through here? We should be going through the gate. I always go through open gates. The use of an open gate when you're working in a pen like this is a phenomenal distraction. It works really well. It gives you a chance to work through something with your horse in a safe situation. Try it. Use it. It works. Now one more time, I'm going to have him walk past the gate, this time with the horse near the fence, which makes it more of a tempting situation for the horse to try to go through the gate. I will guarantee there's many of you watching this video that could try this with your horse, and the horse would go through the gate. The little horse thought about it, but he did very well and stayed with the owner. So as our last horse and owner leave the round pen, I want you to notice how nice and soft and responsive the horse looks. I also want to point out that that's the same way every horse has looked coming out of the round pen in this video. Thanks for watching. Well, by now, after watching all that video, you're probably a little bit brain fried and might be a little bit on overload, but that's okay. You've seen an awful lot of very important information, things you need to know and things you need to notice about your horse. The process you have seen is a way for you to establish a very strong relationship with your horse, something most of us never do. Too often we just want to go ride or do our discipline, and we really don't pay attention to the relationship we have with the horse. One thing about learning is that if you don't use what you've learned, it really does you no good. You have to take the next step, and you have to go out and do what you saw in this video. You have to take the step of putting your horse in the round pen and going through this process, observing the horse and learning what you need to learn, and helping your horse change his attitude about you. You need to get your horse to pay attention. You need to get your horse to develop the respectful attitude we've talked about throughout this video. And in doing it with the correct process, you get the horse to be very comfortable with what's going on. All three things are important. Another important point I'd like to make as we wrap up this video is the idea of you taking responsibility for your horse. As you heard me say many times throughout the video, too often we make excuses. We blame the breed, we blame the sex of the horse, we blame the age of the horse, we blame something, rather than taking responsibility for the way the horse is ourselves. We need to do that. You now have the tools for being able to control your horse. You have the tools and the knowledge of how to get your horse to give you respect. And that's very powerful. But you have to use it. And if it doesn't work, you have to take responsibility for why. You have to go back and study more, learn more, try again, and make it work. It will work. One more important thing for us to talk about is your focus. During these sessions, when you're working with your horse, and for that matter, the entire time you're around your horse, if you will practice being focused on him, if you will develop the ability to really pay attention to everything your horse is doing, that is going to help you immensely. That is part of what this work is about. That is part of why standing there watching your horse to see what he does after you did whatever you did, that's why that's so important. To train yourself to be more focused on the horse and what he's doing. That's very important. Also, when you use this work, don't get so wrapped up in it being work. Treat it like fun. Make a game out of it. As you go out and play with your horse, do just that. Play with your horse. And make sure that you have fun. And most of all, make sure your horse is having fun too. Thanks so much for watching.